I'm here today to talk a little bit about driving repeat usage to your app through email, because I work for an email company. Before I get started, I want to thank everybody for being here. I know it's a long conference. This is the last part of the day, so thank you so much for coming. I know you were getting drinks right after this, so I'm sure there's some joke in there about me driving you to drink. But feel free to make that one on Twitter when this presentation just goes up in flames. If you want to include me on that tweet, I'm YayNickQ on Twitter. Oh, and I guess I'll tweet the slides after this event. But you can get all my slides and code samples there on Twitter. One last note before I really get started is for some reason Ilya didn't call me up and say, hey, Nick, here's what we're releasing at Parse Developer Day. So a couple of my slides are outdated as of like 6 hours ago. So I'll tell you when we get to those, but they're much easier to do now. Anyways, like I said, I'm Nick. I work for a company called SendGrid. And before that, I worked with an internet marketing firm to market some of the world's biggest companies' web properties and try and better understand our users there. A little bit about SendGrid, because I like speaking about it, and I promise this is the only time I'm going to talk about SendGrid during this presentation. SendGrid's a really cool company. We make sending and receiving email from your application really easy. We specialize in sending one kind of email, and that's called a transactional email. Those are the emails that are like, you forgot your password, here it is. Such and such wants to be your friend on Foursquare, or whatever. Or here's your receipt. All these, by the way, are sent with our platform, and every email you're going to see in the presentation is sent with SendGrid, so you can get a feel for who our clients are. These emails are personalized, and we really like sending these personalized emails to people. What we do is very similar to Parse in that we provide you infrastructure so you don't have to think about email. You can spend all your time thinking about the non-boring stuff that makes your app cool. And because we're so like Parse, we actually have a Parse Parse Cloud Code module that allows you to use SendGrid really easily. I have code samples in here that use SendGrid. I want to give you one note so that you don't think I'm pushing SendGrid on you too heavily. They're really abstracted on the part of Parse. So if you want, you can switch out one of our competitors. I don't know why you'd want to do that, though. But you can if for some reason you decide you don't like me after this presentation. Thanks, Brandon. Anyways, as an app developer, you guys have such a wide range of notification styles you can choose. I personally mostly develop web apps, so I don't have this range of push notifications, text messages, emails, and phone calls that users just expect. They are already on their device, so they can expect this text message and easily get to it, or that phone call and easily get to it. So you have a bunch of different things to choose, like how am I going to notify my user? And to make that choice, you really have to better understand why one notification style works better than another. And because this is a presentation about email, I'm going to talk a little bit about email. Some of the strengths of email are, Fred Wilson, yeah, some of the strengths of email are that it is really great for driving engagement. Fred Wilson, who's a noted venture capitalist for Union Square Ventures out of New York, has said today, if you want to drive retention and repeat usage, there is not a better way to do that than email. And I really think that's true. And that's because email has a bunch of strengths. The first one being that it's cross-platform. I know that's iMessage up there. You can tweet about that one too, but email's everywhere. It's on my phone, my tablet, my computer. I can get it on my PSP if I wanted to. It is everywhere, and that's really cool because you know your user is going to be able to get your email no matter where they are. Whereas if you send them a push notification, they're only going to get that on their phone and maybe their tablet. So it's something to think about, and it's something that really gives email a strength. It's also in everybody's workflow already. I know my workflow in the morning. I wake up, I get my coffee, drink it, eat my yogurt, and I check my email. I'm already interacting with your app through my email by not changing a single thing that I do. I don't have to open your app. I don't have to remember to slide the push notification in the morning. It's just there. It's part of my workflow, and that's a real strength too, because you can get to users by not changing anything. Also, it's referenceable. This is extremely important in things like receipts, right? At the end of the month, I need to send in an expense report. But if you sent me my receipt via push notification, my HR department's really not going to like the screenshot that I took 5 seconds after getting the push notification before deleting it. It's not ephemeral. It is always there. So that's really useful in things like receipts, and it's something you want to think about if you want your users to be able to look back at a notification. And perhaps its biggest strength is that according to an exact target study in 2012, 77% of consumers want to get commercial notification by email. They want it over any other platform. They don't want a text message. They don't want a phone call. They don't want a push notification. If they want a commercial notification, they go to email. 77% of consumers want this. So it's something to think about when you're going to send a notification is that my users want this. Now, because I work for an email company, I don't want you to think I don't know some of the weaknesses. There are plenty of weaknesses with email, and there's times when you should forego email to go use some other notification style. One of the first weaknesses is that it's outside of the application. And that's a real problem because if you make a user leave your application flow to open their email, they might just keep reading their email and forget about your app and never come back. Or forget what they were doing and not come back for a while and then have a terrible experience and this, that, the other thing. It's outside your app, so sometimes it's not necessarily the best notification channel. Whereas if they're in your app, you could notify them right there. Another weakness, and I know this was also a strength, and I'm recycling slides. That's because I'm lazy. But it's cross-platform. And you can't assume that everyone can get to what you want them to do. If you send a link to me via email, and it's for your Flash site, and I open it on my phone, that's a terrible experience on my end. I'm going to get a blank white screen or like a download Adobe Flash thing. If you send me an email and assume I can open it in your app and I can press the Open in App button and get your app open and I click it and nothing happens and I keep clicking it and I spend a minute clicking it, first of all, I really don't understand how a button works. And second of all, I've had a terrible experience. Next, it's non-immediate. This goes into the email being part of the workflow. Because it's part of the workflow, people aren't necessarily going to read their email as soon as they get it. So if you need to send somebody an email that needs an immediate response or a notification that needs an immediate response, say like your eggs are done, I might check my email 3 hours later and have really, really burnt eggs. So that's something to consider too. Also, it's ignorable. The current office worker gets 65 legitimate emails a day plus 60 spam emails. So it's really easy for your email to get lost in that, whereas it might not be as easy for your text message or your push notification to get lost in that deluge of notifications. So recognizing the strengths and weaknesses, I think there are really five key uses of email that it outshines any other notification style, and that's platform switches. So you go from your phone to your computer. Receipts, so that you can send it to your expense reporting department or whatever. Messaging, so that you can supplement your messages within your app. Onboarding, and re-engagement. And because this is a talk on engaging your users, I'm going to talk a little bit more about onboarding and re-engagement and not talk about the others, but they're definitely something to think about. So once you determine that you probably should be sending an email for a notification, you need to determine, how do I send this email and make it really good? How do I send a great email? Well, one thing to do is personalize it. And you can see up here, Airbnb personalizes it and tells me, hey, Nick, welcome to Airbnb. But you can personalize it a lot more. And I know you all see it when Amazon emails you. And they say, hey, you liked this book. Why don't you look at the rest of the series or something like that? That personalization users love. They love to see emails that are directly, highly personalized to them. I know whole businesses based around personalizing their email to users, and it's amazing. But one thing you want to consider with this is that there's actually been proven to be a 22% higher open rate on transactional emails when they have personalization in the subject line. So if you say, Nick, comma, here's your receipt, there's a 22% higher chance that I'm going to open it. Now, that doesn't go for marketing emails, though. There's a 55% lower open rate on marketing emails. So if you say, Nick, check out our monthly newsletter, there's a really high chance I'm not going to open it anymore because you personalize it. So know what kind of notification you're sending, what kind of email you're sending before you invest in personalization. The next thing that you want in an email is a direct link. If you're sending somebody an email to tell them about something that happened, an action, an activity, something, I got a notification. Link them to that notification in your app, in your website, whatever. You can see right here it says care to comment, click here, big blue button, right? Get the person to the action the email's telling them about. Don't just bring them to the front page of your website, or don't just open your app. Do something more. Bring them exactly there. Another good example of this is Time Hop. Time Hop will tell you to open the app when you're on your desktop computer. Just like open the app on your phone. But if you're on your phone and you open the same exact email, same exact code, it actually has a button that says open this in your app. And you can open it in the app, and it gets you to the exact place where it's telling you about. And that's awesome. But you need to understand, like, how do you do that? That's the same code right there. Well, luckily I'm here, and I can tell you. What they do is they have some CSS, and this really doesn't matter too much. And remember, code samples are all online, so don't try and like copy this down real quick. Basically, by default, they display every mobile link, and they don't display that by default. But then it takes a guess, and it says, if the screen is fewer than 460 pixels, which you all as app developers know is the iPhone screen width, it's probably mobile. So because it's probably mobile, I think we can display it. And then you display that link. So you put a bunch of links on your page, and you give them the class mobile only, and you put your URL scheme in there. And so now, as a user, I get it on my desktop. I don't see the link. I get it on my phone. I see a link. I click it. I go into your app because you put your URL scheme in there. So that's really, really cool. There's one problem with it, and that's, say, I'm on my laptop, and I somehow see that link. And there's a lot of ways you can see it, because I'm assuming with that 460 pixels that you're on a phone. But it's not necessarily true. Your browser window could be that size, or Outlook for the longest time wasn't paying attention to responsive style, so just display it. So it can be a really poor user experience if you see it. And then also if you don't have the app installed, like again, poor user experience if I click it and nothing happens. So how do you fix that? Well, you can use Parse's cloud code, and basically you'll use Express, and this really isn't that important. Basically, it just says put up a page, and the page looks like this. This page gives some information. It displays a little bit of context. If you don't own it, please download it. And it gives a link to downloading the app. So here's the action I'm trying to accomplish if you don't have it. And then it actually opens up the URL scheme using JavaScript, right? So you see a page, and the JavaScript goes and sets the location, and then it will open up the app. But if I don't have the app, or if the URL scheme doesn't work, or if I'm on my desktop, nothing happens. I just see the notification. So that's really awesome, because I know what context was supposed to be happening, and I get a response to my action, and that's what you want in user experience, right? So then you can put these emails in there, and you give it the link to this Parse cloud code rather than just the link to your URL scheme. You can also mix this in with the mobile-only stuff, and that's really awesome. So away from direct linking, in a great email, you also want one call to action, and just one call to action. That's so that the user doesn't get really confused and click one thing when you wanted them to do something else, or just close it because there are too many decisions to make and they've got decision paralysis. There's a little bit of research that says the bottom, having your action down at the bottom of the email, is good. I don't know that the research was awesome, but it's something to consider and maybe test with your own emails. So now I said I was going to talk a little bit more about the user engagement emails as one of the, like, those 5 key emails. I was going to talk about 2 of them. The first one being onboarding. So 26% of users will download an app, open it for the first time, close it, and never come back. 26% of users. That means a quarter of the people that you fought so hard to get, that you went to that session earlier in the day about getting those users and engaging with them to make them come to your app, they're not coming back. That's a scary number to me. And reasons for that really, really differ. It could be that my friend recommended the app to me, and I was like, yes, oh, this sounds like a great app, and I forgot about it. And so then I never opened it up when the app would become useful to me. Or maybe I left your app because you did something I didn't like in the social media sphere or something like that, and I just never came back to it. Or maybe there was a bug and I couldn't fix it and something happened, right? So when onboarding people, you need to think, when is your app most useful? Does your app become more useful with more data? So time hop, like I mentioned earlier, that app is absolutely useless when you first download it. It won't let you do anything. It displays a spinner. It says, come back later. There's more apps like that, like Tempo and Mailbox. They just display a spinner. Come back later. Email users when they can come back. That's a really important thing to do. And it will get users back into your app because you're outside the app. You're in their inbox, and their inbox is something where they don't have to leave and do stuff with. So they can come back to your app. If your app is like an evenings app, right? Like, here's some nightlife you should check out. Email your users at 6 p.m. Don't email them at like 9 a.m. telling them about the app. Like, here, 6 p.m., you download the app at noon. You probably want to think about nightlife when you're about to go out. An example of this, an app that does just that, is Soch. If you guys don't have Soch yet, super cool app. It tells you all about all these cool nightlife preferences around San Francisco. Tons of fun, but it's not super useful to you immediately because you need to customize it. So you can remind people of the app, and Soch does that. So they send every user an email saying, hey, welcome to Soch. And this is after you've downloaded it, after you've signed up. They wait a little while to send this. And then they give me these links. And this is really awesome because maybe I've forgotten about the app, or maybe I downloaded it at 12 noon and I wasn't ready to go out. Well, now it's giving me the recommendation. So that's a really good way to do things and make sure your users get onboarded. How do you onboard users, though? Let's talk about that with Parse. This is the thing where Ilya messed me up a little bit because you can do this really, really simply now with the background processes. Rather than setting up this Express backend, what you need to start thinking about is basically, I query users and I say, are they onboarded? Search for all users who are not onboarded. And then I look at those users and I loop through each one of them and I send them a quick email saying, hey, welcome to my app, blah, blah, blah. And then you save that they've been onboarded so you don't send them 7 emails saying, hey, welcome to my app. So super simple to do with Parse, and super simple now to do with the background processes because you can set one up to run every 6 hours or something like that. Before you'd have to use cron and blah, 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 blah. Don't worry about it. One thing you want to consider, though, when you're sending time-based emails is that your users are probably in different time zones. And 7 a.m. here is like 2 a.m. in Australia. So that's a big difference if you're telling the people to go to breakfast. Like, the Australians are really going to be upset that there's no breakfast out at 2 in the morning when they search your app. So that's something to think about when you're using cron or when you're using Parse's background processes. Make sure you know your users' time zones. And so you'll get a cool app like that, or a cool email like that. The next thing I want to talk about a little bit is re-engagement. And so when you're doing re-engagement, again, you need to ask yourself a similar question. Why did they leave? Was there mass exodus? Blah, blah, blah. You need to get them re-involved. So to get them re-involved, you need to give them some information about what benefits they can get. Tell them what they're missing. Twitter will email me and tell me, hey, you know, your mom's missing you on Twitter. She's tweeted 17 times. And yes, my mom tweets. Tell them what benefits they get. If you're selling a consumer product, consider giving them a % off, 10, 20% off. It often works in re-engagement campaigns. And this is just common courtesy. But when you're doing a re-engagement campaign, give everybody a way to tell them, I don't want to re-engage. I don't like your app. Shut up. Stop emailing me. Stop contacting me. Never talk to me again, right? Give people that. That's just common courtesy. And I really just want to mention that to make sure you guys do it. There's a code sample here, but again, this was something that was actually shown pretty much exactly in the presentation this morning. You'll use a background process, and you just check when they last opened your app, and then send them an email. If you want to see that code, again, online, or go to Ilya's slides, because they're exactly the same. There's some tools that you can use for all of this. So the first one being Analytics. When you do some analysis of users, or when you want to re-engage with users, or when you want to figure out when to best onboard a user, you need to know your user. You need to analyze them. You need to figure out who they are, why they're interacting with you. And this is another slide where I should have known that Parse was going to have analytics, because you could use Parse Analytics, and that's really cool. But I also wanted to talk about a couple other things. Google Analytics is super cool. I hope you guys all use it. They have a universal analytics where you can actually use your app and your website data and combine them, and they'll tell you all sorts of cool stuff. The one thing you need to know about Google Analytics, though, is you cannot track individual users. And this is a problem for things like re-engagement campaigns, where you want to know, oh, so the user left at this time, and they left probably for this reason because they did this series of steps, so let's re-engage them. You can't do that in Google Analytics because it's against their terms of service. So there's Mixpanel and Kissmetrics that you can combine with Parse data that will do it. Instead, you can also knock those out and combine it with Parse Analytics and figure that out. And then run a database query on your analytics and say, find me these users with these conditions, and re-engage them with those re-engagement emails. There's actually a full service that does this called UserFox. Currently, they only work for a website, but they're definitely a cool person to keep a look at. You install a snippet on your website, and they'll just look at your user interactions, and they'll send out pre-scheduled emails to them, like, oh, here's a user who used your site this long, and they didn't sign up. And you can send them an email based on those conditions. Super cool. Doesn't work for iOS or Android unless you hack it. They've got a cool API, and if you simulated your app and pretended it was a website, so like myapp.yourdomain.com/open-screen/sign-up screen/blah, blah, blah, you could make it work. But hopefully, they'll eventually put in mobile platform too. Next, for email, this probably is a real shocker for you. And I know I said I wasn't going to push SendGrid anymore, but I'd say go ahead and use SendGrid, because we're pretty cool. And now I want to talk a little bit about something I did here to demonstrate Parse and SendGrid put together. I wrote a demo app in preparation for this. And well, first of all, it was my first time writing any Objective-C. And so I want to let you guys know that I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing here. The code is, it works, and I had a coworker write it too. So hopefully the Objective-C stuff is up to snuff. I had a really hard time learning it personally, and the easiest part of that app was integrating Parse into it. Like, it was so easy. So good job on Parse's part. One other thing I wanted to note is that I was really prepared. I said, iOS 7 is going to be out by now. So I should probably design it for iOS 7 because people are going to want the newest app, and it can't be skeuomorphic, and it's got to be flat. And then I realized that iOS 7 is not out today. And because I developed it for iOS 7, I'm under NDA. So you can't see the code samples until Tuesday when Apple puts it out. But I'll tell you a little bit about the app. Yeah, good planning on my part, I know. So the app stems from a problem I have. I go to lots of events as a developer evangelist, and I meet a lot of people. And I get a lot of business cards. I could take out the business cards in my back pocket and make it rain right now. And this happens constantly, every event I go to. And so I want a way to get rid of business cards and make sure my business card doesn't get forgotten and their business card doesn't get forgotten. And one of my coworkers told me he doesn't accept business cards anymore. He takes out his phone, he makes them put in their email address, and sends them an email saying, hey, I'm Brandon, here's some information, blah, blah, blah. And I thought that was super cool, but I was like, well, you have to type out an email every time. That's super difficult. Well, I'm in an app for it because I'm a developer and I'm lazy. So what this app does is it will email you so you can make a template, right, for an event. And you can say, I'm at Parse Developer Day. And you can fill it out and say, it was great to meet you at Parse Developer Day, blah, 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 and template it out so that the email looks super personalized. Then, once it's added to the home screen again, you can actually go in, you click Parse Developer Day, and say I met George at Parse Developer Day. Said, hey, George, can you put in your name and email address, or can you put in your email address? And George types it in and hits done, and it gets sent. So that's all super cool. George gets an email with some information about me, and he can reply, and we've got an email record of not only my information, but where we met. And that's super handy when George contacts me again and says, hey, Nick, remember that time when we met? Can you help me? And I go, I don't remember that time when we met. Now I do, because it's in my email. Like that. So the other cool thing is George clicks it, and he opens the email, and he sees all my information. And now, what I get is a push notification. Well, OK. I was supposed to get a push notification. I get a push notification, and that's through SendGrid's Events API. So I see as soon as George reads the email. So I know my email didn't go to his spam, didn't do anything. George knows who I am, and he's seen my email. Anyways, that is my talk.